Hello there. My name is Dr. Chiron Wesley Graves, and I'm here again with Mr. Pickles. You all may remember Mr. Pickles from the previous video. And in the previous video, I talked about gamete formation. And in this video, I would like to talk about probability and how we use Punnett squares and the product rule to determine probability of offspring. So Mr. Pickles has both the clown phenotype, which you can see here in the striping along the back, and the albino phenotype, which you can see from the lack of melanin being produced by his melanophores. But he's the only one of his siblings to have both the albino phenotype, which is a recessive phenotype, and the clown phenotype, which is also a recessive phenotype. So it begs the question, why? And for that, we can turn to probability and figure out the probability of an offspring getting both the albino phenotype and the clown phenotype. And so we can use Punnett squares and the product rule to determine that. And so let's go ahead and do that now. So let's start with the TYR gene. This is the gene responsible for the albino phenotype. We're going to talk about two alleles here. We are going to use a capital T to denote the dominant allele. That allele encodes for functional tyrosinase, which is needed to make melanin. And then in red, in lowercase t with the superscript a, lowercase a, we'll use that to denote the recessive allele, which encodes for non-functional tyrosinase. And of course, non-functional tyrosinase means no melanin being produced. We have Ahsoka, who has a genotype, a homozygous recessive genotype. So little t, with the two superscript A's. And of course, her phenotype is albino. So she makes no melanin. And then we have Mansa, who was the father, or who is the father of Mr. Pickles, and he has a heterozygous genotype, so he has a dominant and a recessive allele for the TYR gene, and we'll refer to his phenotype as wild type wild type for the TYR gene in the sense that he is able to make melanin. So remember, in the last video, I talked about Ahsoka making gametes, and each gamete that she produces has one of two alleles. But because she's homozygous, both of those possibilities are the same, and so we see them represented here, the two recessive alleles. And for Mansa, he is able to make sperm that has either a wild type or a dominant or a recessive allele for the TYR gene. So let's draw out our Punnett square. And in the first column, we are going to put the allele that's represented by the gamete Ahsoka formed on the left, and in the second column, the gamete formed by Ahsoka on the right. With Mansa, in this first row, will represent the possibilities if the gamete that fertilizes Ahsoka's egg is the one with the wild type allele or the dominant allele. And in the bottom row, the possibilities if Ahsoka's egg is fertilized by the sperm cell that has the recessive allele. What we see looking at our Punnett square is that of the four possibilities, or of the four possible offspring, 50% of those possible offspring would have an albino phenotype because they would be homozygous recessive. So 1/2 of the possible offspring would be albino. And then the other 50% of the offspring would be wild type, or half of them we would expect to be wild type. And those individuals would be heterozygous for the TYR gene. We would also refer to those as carriers of the albino trait. Now let's look at the MC1R gene, and that is the gene responsible for the clown phenotype. And again, we're going to consider two alleles. We are going to use a capital M to represent the wild type or dominant allele. And that one encodes for a functional melanocortin 1 receptor, or MC1R, which controls melanophore distribution throughout the ball python's body. And remember, that is the dominant allele. And in orange, and with a lowercase m, will represent the recessive allele that encodes for an altered form of the melanocortin 1 receptor. And again, we have our two parents, Ahsoka and Mansa. And Ahsoka's genotype is heterozygous for the MC1R gene, so she has a dominant allele and a recessive allele. And her phenotype for this gene is wild type. And the same is the case with Mansa. For the MC1R gene, he is heterozygous, so one dominant allele and one recessive allele. And he also has a wild type phenotype when it comes to the MC1R gene. So once again, let's take a look at Ahsoka's possible gametes. And for the MC1R gene, we see that there are two possible gametes, one with a dominant allele and one with a recessive allele. And the same is the case for Mansa, and that he has the possibility of producing gametes with a dominant allele and gametes with a recessive allele. And so let's do our Punnett square again in that first column. That will be used to represent Ahsoka's gametes, the possibility with Ahsoka's gametes with the wild type allele or the dominant allele. And in the second column, the possibilities with the recessive allele from Ahsoka. And when we combine that, when we combine that with the wild type allele from Mansa's gametes, or his sperm, when they fertilize these particular gametes from Ahsoka, we have a homozygous dominant or a heterozygous option. And then when the sperm with the recessive allele fertilizes either the dominant allele for Ahsoka, leading to heterozygous, or the recessive gamete for the gamete with the recessive allele for Ahsoka fertilized by the sperm with the recessive allele from Mansa, we have our homozygous recessive individual that would result in the clown phenotype. And so what that Punnett square shows us is there's a 75% probability that the offspring will have a wild type phenotype. So basically 3 of the 4 possible outcomes are wild type phenotypes. looking a little bit closer at the genotypes of these three individuals, one of the three that would have a wild type phenotype has the probability of being homozygous dominant, and the other two of the three have a possibility of being heterozygous for the clown allele, or carriers of the clown allele, the recessive allele. And then 25% of the offspring have a probability of having the clown phenotype. In other words, 1/4 we could expect to have a clown phenotype. So this brings us to the probability of having offspring that have both the albino phenotype and the clown phenotype, which is the situation or the scenario that we find with Mr. Pickles. He is both albino and clown, or he has both the albino phenotype and a clown phenotype. And so what is the probability of Mansa and Ahsoka having offspring like Mr. Pickles? Now, we can do a Punnett square to figure that out, but the Punnett square would need to have more than just the 4 squares that we saw when we looked at a single gene, or when we did what's called a monohybrid cross, just looking at one gene where the two phenotypes are different. The other option is we can use the product rule, and the "and" in this question tips us off that we would use the product rule and not the addition rule or the sum rule. And the way that works is we take the probability of offspring with an albino phenotype. So if you recall, that was 50%, or 1/2 of the 4 possibilities were albino or homozygous recessive possibilities. And we multiply that with the probability of the clown phenotype, which you may recall was 25%, or 1/4. We multiply those two fractions together, we get 1/8. So there is a 1/8 probability of Mansa and Ahsoka producing an offspring that has both the albino and the clown phenotype. And that translates into 12.5%, or there's a 12.5% chance that when they have offspring, that offspring will be both albino and clown, or have both albino and clown phenotypes. Dr. Graves back again with Mr. Pickles. And so that is an example of how you would use, or how you use your Punnett squares and the product rule to calculate probability. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to learn more about the traits featured in this video, or any of the concepts we talked about, be sure to check out the description for this video, where I have some links to a bunch of different resources. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see you then.